Welcome to Enjoy the Journey podcast, where we interview expert entrepreneurs and thought leaders to help guide you in pursuit of financial freedom. Presented to you by Jackson Milan, the Wealth Mentor, where we help service-based business owners remove cash flow bottlenecks, maximize their profits, and turn business profits into personal wealth. G'day guys, this is Jackson Milan, the Wealth Mentor, and we're here for another episode of the Enjoy the Journey podcast. And I've got a very special guest with me here today, Seiler Tucker, who is a mergers and acquisitions expert and the author of Exit Rich, which is what many of us want to do as business owners. And there's some pretty scary statistics around people who actually exit businesses, not only exit in the first place, but exit profitably. I mean, it's definitely a science behind it because you can't just get out of bed one day and say, I'm going to sell my business. You need to make sure that you've got a strategy in place and that you've followed a proven process. I'm really looking forward to unpacking this with Michelle today. So Michelle, thanks for joining us. How are you doing?
Thank you. I'm doing great, Jackson. Thank you for having me.
So Michelle, tell us a little bit about you and what you do.
Sure. So I'm a mergers and acquisitions Master Intermediary, certified mergers and acquisitions professional, senior business analyst, and a bunch of other acronyms behind my name. What do? I specialize in buying, selling, fixing, growing companies. To date, I've personally sold over 500 companies. My firm altogether has done 1,000, and in pretty much every single vertical you can imagine. So we sell businesses, we merge businesses together. I've also partnered with business owners, investing my money, time, expertise, energy, and fixing the business and putting them on a build to sell program. We buy businesses and flip them. So really, we specialize, like I said, in buying, selling, fixing, and growing companies. I'm an author and a best-selling author, I should say, Wall Street Journal best-selling author, USA Today best-selling author, Amazon, of course, and an international speaker.
Amazing. Fantastic. So Michelle, this is a very specialized area. How did you find yourself getting involved in mergers and acquisitions?
I've always been in sales and I've always been in entrepreneurship. So I've always done many different businesses in different verticals. And I owned a franchise development, sales consulting, and sales business. So I would help franchisors develop their concept. I would help business owners develop their franchise concept, help partner with them with the right strategic attorneys, help build out their model, help them grow the business, help them develop it, and help them sell franchises. And I had so many buyers that kept coming to me asking me for existing businesses. I'm like, no, we don't have existing businesses. We specialize in startup franchises. Finally, I'm like, why do I keep saying no? I need to listen to what the consumers are asking for and give them what they want. And that's really when I started my M&A firm nearly over 20 years ago.
Amazing. Fantastic. So let's talk a little bit about the psychology of a buyer, because I feel that this typically goes in cycles, and really seasoned entrepreneurs don't want to start up businesses. They might invest some money in some startups as kind of like a potential opportunity for them to make some big bucks. But a lot of seasoned entrepreneurs want proven business models. So what are buyers looking for in a purchase of an established business?
So buyers, it depends upon what type of buyer it is. There's 5 different types of buyers, and most people don't know that. So 90 in America, I'm not sure about Australia, but in America, 90% of buyers are first-time buyers.
Mm.
So first-time buyers buy small businesses like coffee shops, restaurants, ice cream stores, retail, etc., typically under a couple $1,000,000. They buy small businesses. And what do they want? So in my book, I even talk about the 5 types of buyers, what they're looking for, and what their negotiables and non-negotiables are. And so for first-time buyers, they really need an advisor to hold their hand because they don't know what they want. I've had many buyers call me and say, I want to buy a restaurant. I'm like, really? Do you have experience in a restaurant? Have you ever worked in a restaurant? Have you ever managed a restaurant? Do you really want a restaurant? And so they really need an advisor to hold their hand, to walk them through the process, to find out what their core competencies are, what their strengths are, what their weaknesses are, what their passions are, and then really walk them through the financial capability, because a lot of first-time buyers don't even know how much money they have available to buy a business. They don't know what they qualify for. Many of them don't even know what their credit score is. And first-time buyers are going to require a comfort zone. They're going to require some seller financing. They're going to require the seller to be confident enough in their business to provide seller financing to them. They're going to require training. They're going to require non-competes. They want a real comfort level in order for them to pull the trigger, because I've never done this before. So that's first-time buyers.
Yep.
Turnaround specialists is the second type of buyers. Turnaround specialists want to buy distressed assets and they want to use the leverage. They want to really leverage the assets of the business to purchase a company. Take the assets, get a loan against the assets, get a loan against receivables, get a loan against inventory, and buy the business really with no money down. They go in, they fix the business, they turn around and sell it for a profit. So what are they looking for? Again, they're looking for a failing business. They're looking for a desperate owner. They're looking for assets that they can leverage, and they're looking for a business that they know they can grow an ROI within probably 2 to 4 years. And then you have private equity groups, which is the third type of buyer. Private equity groups buy two ways. They buy based on platforms and add-ons. So a platform is, let's say that they want to get into healthcare staffing. They won't even consider a healthcare staffing business unless it has at least $3 million in EBITDA. EBITDA is earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, amortization. Now, if they already have a platform in healthcare staffing, they'll consider other smaller type healthcare staffing businesses under $1 million in EBITDA, and that's called an add-on. So private equity groups typically EBITDA specific. They're specific in which they're trying to acquire a platform or an add-on. They're specific that if it's a platform, they want to make sure that the management team is going to stick around, that the business has a great management team. They want to make sure that the business is sustainable. They want to make sure that they can scale it. And they want to make sure that they do their due diligence and, there's no skeletons in the closet, so to speak. Typically, they want, like I said, management to stay in. They'll want to do some seller financing, not as much as first-time buyers. Typically, they'll put down 60 to 70% and want to finance the difference. They usually won't sign PGs, personal guarantees. Then you have the fourth type of buyer, which are strategics and competitors. Strategics and competitors typically pay the highest multiple because they're paying for synergies that will catapult their current business to the next level. So they're paying more for contracts, management team, talent, databases, patents, trademarks. They're paying more celebrity endorsements, content, anything that's IP, intellectual property. Their non-negotiables is typically they want the management team to stay on as well. They want the employees to stay on. They'll do some seller financing, probably again with the 60 to 70% down. And again, all this is covered in my book, but they want to make sure there's going to be non-competes in place as well.
Beautiful. Great. I think it's really important to know these because you're right. Most people have never even heard of any of these things before.
They never heard about them 5 times. And then the last type of buyer is a sophisticated entrepreneur.
Yep.
And a sophisticated entrepreneur, this is a serial entrepreneur, and I call them storm chasers. They drive around in little vehicles that you're driving in right now. No, I'm kidding. They chase EBITDA. They chase cash flow. They're industry agnostic. When you get into the last 3 types of buyers, they want to make sure that the business is operating on all 6 cylinders. It's very important to them that you have the solid infrastructure in place. They want to make sure that all your IP, intellectual property, is protected. They want to make sure that you have a management team with non-competes in place. They want to make sure that your policies and procedures are all buttoned up. And they want to make sure you have customer diversification, not customer concentration. That's important to those last 3 types of buyers.
And I guess it's because they're not looking to create a job for themselves, right, Michelle?
That's right. And that's why 80% of businesses in America will never sell, because most business owners have a job that they go to work at every day versus a business that works for them.
Yeah. And this is great because I think we need to put ourselves in the mindset of the buyer in order to understand how do we position this for sale, right? So let's talk about some of the mistakes. When people are looking to sell their business, where do they get it wrong, Michelle?
Everywhere. So the biggest mistake that business owners make is they wake up one day because a catastrophic event has occurred. Maybe they're diagnosed with cancer, diagnosed with some type of health issue, or they wake up one day and their partner says, I want a divorce. The spouse says, I want a divorce, or they're having a partner dispute, or, death, unfortunately, or they wake up so that's catastrophic events. They wake up one day and an internal or external catastrophic event occurs. External could be this pandemic that we've been in for the last year and a half. They're like, I'm done. I want to sell my business and I want $10 million for it. And I'm always like, well, how'd you come up with your number? Oh, and their answers are always the same. Well, that's what I need to retire on. That's not based upon what the value is of the business. So there's a huge disconnect for business owners because they don't plan their exit. They don't think about how a catastrophic event has occurred. When you're trying to sell during a catastrophe, your business is typically trending downward. It's not doing well. It's not going to be worth maximum value. And the disconnect is Most business owners never get their business evaluated, so they have absolutely no idea what their business is worth. They always come up with their value based upon what they need to enter the next phase of their life versus what the business is actually worth to someone. So that's the biggest mistake, is not planning your exit from the beginning. In my book, Exit Rich, we talk about the GPS exit model and how to really plan the end from the beginning. Like Stephen Covey says, start with the end in mind,
Yeah.
and really plan your exit from day one of buying or starting a business. So that's number one. Number two is, we just mentioned it. Business owners have created a glorified job in which they're going to work it every day versus a business that works for them. So the business is 1,000% dependent upon them. There's nothing to sell. I just had a lady call me from Texas not too long ago. Her 40-year-old husband dropped dead from a heart attack. No warning signs whatsoever, left her with a mountain of debt, asked me if I could sell his business. He had been in business for 20 years, but he had no employees. He had all independent contractors, subcontractors, and all the data was in his head. So when he died, the business died. So you got to make sure that you're building a business, not a job. Also, the biggest mistake the business owners make, they don't build a business that buyers want to buy. And they don't build a business with a solid infrastructure, solid foundation in place. And that's what we call it, building your business to run on all six cylinders, all six Ps. And that's what we talk about in my book, Exit Rich.
Makes perfect sense. Great. So obviously, we ideally want to be building a business from the beginning to sell, but most people don't. So what would you say is the minimum time frame that you need to have available to be able to get that business from being maybe being reliant on the owner, not being run like a business that a buyer wants to actually buy? What's a, I guess, time frame that people really need to consider or be realistic with to reposition their business to get the best possible value?
So the time frame is always tough because, again, it goes back to valuation, and it goes back to what the owner really feels like they need in which to exit. So if an owner feels like they need 10 million and the company is worth 5 million, can that owner afford to sell for 5 million? If so, then, it could be a year to sell the business. Do we need to build up that company to get it to a $10 million business before we put it on the market?
I
So that's
understand.
always a difficult question to answer because it just really depends. I mean, if the owner is 80 years old and he's like, I want to sell 2 million, then we're going to walk him through a process called a seller sanity check and find out, okay, well, how much do you really need per month per year to live on? How long are you going to live? Let's take that $5 million, put it in a seller's deferred trust where you're not having to pay capital gains. And maybe $5 million is the number. You follow me?
Yep.
So there's a process we have to take our clients through to really determine what's the best timing to sell for them based upon where they are in their life.
Beautiful. Makes sense. So there's probably a lot of people out there that say, okay, well, if I'm going to get some help around this stuff, it's going to be expensive. I'm going to have to pay through the teeth to get the best possible price for my business. But I'm always a big believer that if you want to get the best possible outcomes, you got to get the best possible advice. So when it comes to working with somebody, maybe let's talk about some of the horror stories that you've seen of people who've tried to either self-represent and sell their businesses themselves, or those who've been able to work with someone like yourself to be able to get their business ready for sale. What have been the contrast in terms of outcomes as a result of those two scenarios?
So, and then I'll throw another scenario in there for you.
Please, that'd be great.
There's a lot of sellers that attempt to sell their business on their own. And gosh, there's so many horror stories. I'm trying to think of one in particular, but I'll just kind of group them all together. Some of the biggest issues that they've faced is trying to sell the business on their own. They breach confidentiality. So now the employees know the business is for sale. And I've had business owners lose employees. I've had business owners come back and tell me, look, I lost employees because I tried to do this by myself. The customers find out, the clients find out that they're trying to sell their business. The vendors find out, landlords find out. So breach of confidentiality is probably one of the number one concerns, and typically can ruin the business before you sell the business. So when an owner is trying to sell the business on their own, that's usually the biggest issue right there. Number two, though, it's tough for a business owner to sell their business on their own because evaluation. I mean, they're experts at selling their business, but they're not experts at evaluating it. It's very difficult too because I've had a lot of business owners come to me and say, oh, Michelle, I just wasted 2 years. I'm like, what'd you waste 2 years on? And I'm like, I worked with one buyer, did all this stuff. We got a client we're working with right now. She said, and we're actually about to go under LOI with her and a buyer. But she said, I did this for 2 years. I worked with this buyer, gave him access to my QuickBooks, gave him all this stuff, had a simple non-disclosure agreement signed, but not a non-compete. He took all my information, went and competed against me.
Wow.
So she says, I didn't know that. I didn't know I should get a non-compete. And so there's all kinds of horror stories like that where buyers will come in, take your client list, take all your financial information, and then go and compete against you. The biggest thing is breach of confidentiality, wasting a tremendous amount of time. Also, a lot of times when business owners try to sell on their own, they really don't properly disclose that buyer and get the proper non-compete signed, and they don't properly qualify that buyer. I've got another owner that we're working with. It's a flooring company. And he says, I went through this process with a terrible broker. He bought me nobody. And he bought me only people he did bring me were unqualified. And then he says, then I met this one buyer that we started working with. I worked with him for 2 years and couldn't get him qualified.
I think this really hits home, Michelle, because
Yeah.
this is not a fast process. And in
Yeah.
my experience working with a lot of our clients who they originally get started and say, I never want to sell. This is my dream. I love it. And then one day they get out of bed and like, stuff this, I've had enough, and they want
That's
to sell.
exactly what happens. They're
Yeah,
like, this is my baby. I'll
ex-
never sell my baby. And
exactly.
they're like, oh, I'm done with employees. I'm done with this. I'm done with that.
There's
You get to a point of no return where you just can't take it anymore. It's called burnout.
100%. And I think the issue
Yeah.
here is that people don't have a fair, realistic expectation of how long it's actually going to take to sell their business,
Yeah.
if they want to sell it for a good price. Because sure, you might be able to find an opportunistic competitor who'd be willing to buy your business for cents on the dollar if you wanted to sell it tomorrow. But if you want to get a fair and a great price for your business, it takes time to find that right qualified buyer. And I think
Well, it
this also
takes
comes
time to
to
find the right buyer, but it takes time to fix your business.
that's right.
It takes time to get you running on all 6 Ps that we talk about in Exit Rich because you're probably running on 3 out of the 6. It takes time to get your financials in order, because most businesses' financials are a disaster. Yeah, it takes time to get all of your documentation together and get it in a data room. I will say this, though, just so your listeners hear me.
Please.
Businesses that have an EBIT of under $1 million typically take longer to sell than businesses over a million in EBITDA. So just remember that. And the reason for that is because there are more buyers for good businesses than there are good businesses to buy.
Yeah.
So there's a much lower percentage of businesses that operate, of EBITDA over a million than there are that don't. So when you have a high EBITDA, we can bring hundreds of buyers to the table, creating a bidding war on the sale of your business, which maximizes your value.
Beautiful. And that's the ideal scenario. And I guess this all stems on this idea of profitability, real profitability in a business. And many business owners run their business as if it's an ATM, and they put their personal expenses through and they rack up other expenses and they minimize their tax and they do all of these things that small business owners do who aren't trying to sell. So what do solid financials that create that bidding war and create that desire for people to want to get access to this business? What do solid financials in a really great business need to look like?
So a business number one has to, and it's pretty much industry agnostic because all industries, they got over a million in EBITDA, they're going to have buyers. So number one sweet spot is get your EBITDA over $1 million in EBITDA. It doesn't really matter about gross revenues and everything and profit margins. Yes, it's nice to a private equity group to look at that. But at the end of the day, you could be grossing $100 million and making no money. So at the end of the day, unless you're a SaaS company, a SaaS business, it's all about your EBITDA. Most businesses are paid a multiple of EBITDA, whereas SaaS is paid a multiple of revenues. So you got to get your EBITDA of over $1 million if you want to maximize value, because that's the sweet spot of where we can bring you multiple buyers. Also, you want to operate on all 6 cylinders. Make sure you have all 6 Ps and you've built that infrastructure. Make sure you've protected your proprietary assets. Make sure you have non-competes with your management team.
Beautiful. Makes a lot of sense. This is a lot of stuff that once you know, you go, yeah, that makes sense. But it's just you don't know what you don't know. And that's the most dangerous part in playing this game. And it just pays to work with someone like yourself and read books like yours that are going to give people those tools and those frameworks they need to make informed and educated decisions. Because we're talking about millions of dollars in opportunity cost potentially lost here if you get this wrong. Definitely something to keep in mind. So, Michelle, if we had to give some parting notes, some things that our listeners can take away and take action upon, what would be your top 3 tips for a business owner who's really considering how they take the next steps on their journey to maximize the value of their business so they can position it for sale? What would be the top 3 tips that you'd leave us with?
Well, the number one tip I would tell you is get my book Exit Rich. And I'm not just telling you that to sell books, promise me. I make no money off of books. But Get my book Exit Rich because it has all the steps you need to do, like you need to plan your GPS exit model. You need to figure out what your destination is, what you want to sell your business for. And if you want to sell a $10 million company, then you need to build a $10 million company. You can't just have a pie in the sky number. And then it talks about the infrastructure and how to build your business on the infrastructure. So number one, I would say get exit rich. Number two, I would say that GPS exit model is so important for you to figure out what do you want to sell for? What is your business worth today? Because I can promise you, most business owners have never had their business evaluated. Your business is your most valuable asset. You should have an annual valuation checkup because there are events that increase valuation or events that decrease valuation. You need to know every year what your business is worth. So you really need to follow that GPS exit model. So get exit rich, number one. Number two, align yourself with an M&A expert, an M&A advisor, somebody who's been doing this for decades, selling hundreds upon hundreds of businesses, someone that knows how to evaluate synergies and can bring multiple buyers to the table, because you don't want to go to the CPA to get that annual valuation checkup. You want to go to an M&A expert. Okay. So that's number two. Number three, really align yourself with an M&A expert consultant that can help you put you on the road to sell, put you on the road to sell for your desired price tag. Because there's so many moving parts. There's so many things that you've never thought about. I'll give you one thing right now. Most business owners in America don't even have a federal trademark on their company name. They
Wow.
could be in business 5, 10, 15 years and all of a sudden receive a cease and desist letter and says you have to stop using that company name. Or they have contracts with their clients, but they don't have transferability language in their contracts. So when they go to sell their business, the contracts are not transferable.
Nothing to sell.
Those are two tips right there. It's not what you know that get you in trouble. It's what you don't know. And I'll leave you with my favorite quote. My favorite quote is, it's hard to read the label from the inside of the bottle. You need an outsider's perspective to read the warning signs and keep you out of the danger zone. So get exit rich, align yourself with an M&A expert, whether it's us, we do business in Australia, or it's someone else, and make sure you get an expert M&A advisor who also can consult you on how to build that business to sell, how to build your business to sell.
Michelle, this has been super valuable. I'm going to grab a copy of your book because this is something that's fascinating to me. And I know that many of our listeners are going to get a ton of value from this. So guys, if you listen to this episode and you've got some value and this is something that's down up your alley that you really want to continue this conversation, just make sure you get that knowledge, make sure you get that support, and ultimately get yourself on the right path to start preparing your business for sale now, before you get out of bed one day and decide that now's the day that you want to sell, because it's going to be too late. Michelle, thanks for making the time. I really appreciate it.
Can I tell everybody where to get the book?
Yeah, please. How do we get access to the book?
So first and foremost, my website is seilertucker.com. You can reach out to me. We do have clients in Australia, UK, Ireland, everywhere. We're global. So go to seilertucker.com, connect with me on social media. And so if you're in Australia or any other country other than the United States, I do recommend that you go to Amazon in your country because to avoid high shipping costs. And if you're in the United States, I encourage you to go to exitrichbook.com because that's where all the bonuses are for $24.79 plus shipping costs in the United States. We'll email you the digital download. We'll ship you the hardcover. We'll give you a lifetime membership. Now, here's the deal. If you're outside the United States, send me the receipt that you bought on Amazon and I'll still give you the bonuses. So we'll give you a lifetime membership to Exit Rich Book Club, where there's lots of video content and me doing deep dives in these different strategies and techniques that I've been teaching for 20 years in the trenches, plus documents to run your company, documents to sell your company. So we have example employee handbooks, org charts, policy and procedure manuals. We have sample letter of intent, sample due diligence checklist, closing documents, purchase agreements, everything you need to operate your business and sell your business are there for your review and download. This will cost you over $50,000 in the States because attorneys are expensive. And we're also giving you a 30-day free membership into Club CEOs, whereas an entrepreneurship mastermind where we really ask those tough questions and help you build a sustainable, scalable, and sellable business. Also wanted to let you know that Exit Rich is a Wall Street Journal bestseller, USA Today, Amazon, endorsed by Steve Forbes. Steve Forbes says the gold mine for entrepreneurs is they leave way too much money on the table when they sell their business. And my co-author is Sharon Lechter, who wrote Rich Dad Poor Dad with Robert Kiyosaki. And Exit Rich is endorsed by Kevin Harrington, the original Shark on Shark Tank.
Phenomenal, Michelle. We'll include all of those notes and those links in the show notes. It's been super valuable, and looking forward to continuing the conversation. And I appreciate you making the time.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Take
Thank
care.
you.